Understanding Austen's purpose was difficult to me at first. I struggled keeping up with the language that Austen used to show the reader the upper class that was being represented. However, once I started annotating the novel, Austen's purpose became much clearer. In Pride and Prejudice, a typical love story takes place between Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet. When they first meet, however, they are anything but in love. In this case, I am more like Elizabeth than Mr. Darcy because I judge quickly based on first impressions, and Elizabeth ended up thinking badly of Mr. Darcy because he gave her a bad impression. However, I don't let my prejudices against people who are different than I cause myself to not see who they really are, like how Mr. Darcy's prejudice against Elizabeth's social standing blinded him to how beautiful she really was. For example, the first line of the novel, "It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in one of a wife," sets up the novel. It shows the reader the views that society has on love and marriage. However, it is verbally ironic and sort of contradicts the rest of the novel, because Austen wrote more about women who were concerned with finding rich husbands than about men who were concerned with finding wives. Austen also uses many hyperboles, such as "he was the proudest, most disagreeable man in the world," to show the enormous amount of pride that Elizabeth thinks that Mr. Darcy has. However, this particular example also depicts pride in Elizabeth. Her pride is so great that she wouldn't even look twice at Mr. Darcy after he had only offended her once by not dancing with her. And as the novel progresses, Elizabeth's pride seems to grow because Mr. Darcy eventually does ask her to dance, and she refuses because everybody already thinks badly of Mr. Darcy.
Austen characterizes Darcy to be very prejudiced. He believes that he is better than everyone else because he comes from a family of great wealth and he's being forced to stay in a town where everyone only has small fortunes. Austen's hyperboles indicate that Darcy does not want to associate himself with people other than Mr. Bingley and his sisters. At first, I believed that Austen was just trying to make a point that Darcy was very conceited, but after reading through the entire novel, I started believing that maybe Pride and Prejudice, as said in the title, are both referring to Mr. Darcy. While other characters seem to carry some Pride and Prejudice as well, there isn't a single reference to Pride or Prejudice in the book where Darcy wasn't around. Before reading this novel, I associated pride with something good. I felt good whenever someone would say that they were proud of me, and I loved when other people made me proud. I love how Austen flipped the meaning of pride and associated it with something to dislike. In the novel, the people would talk of Mr. Darcy's pride, and it would mean that he thinks himself better than them, which let the reader know that Mr. Darcy was disliked. This made pride a symbol for dislike throughout the entire novel, so when the reader would see the word pride, they would automatically associate it with something to not want.
My last example is of Mrs. Bennet. Austen wrote her to have a very dramatic persona. She frequently contradicts herself to make a point, such as when she is gossiping about Mrs. Long, but then ends up saying that she has no opinion of her. Austen writes it this way to show the reader that Mrs. Bennet has quite a lot of pride as well. Her pride envelops her and causes her to be very cautious of who she makes acquaintance with, so that others will view her as someone to know. Pride and Prejudice is considered to be a fantastic piece of literature. I believe it is because it was written by a female author in the 1800s who was writing about her society at the time and how she viewed it. Austen used symbols such as love to relate her views on the subject to what society believes. For example, her society in the 1800s believed that one did not have to be in love to marry, which Austen showed through Charlotte Lucas's marrying Mr. Collins for his money. However, she also showed her view on love through Elizabeth, who did not believe that she could be happy marrying someone she was not in love with.
So, in the end, I figured that Austen's purpose for writing Pride and Prejudice was to not only present her society's ideas on love and relate them to her own, but also make a point that too much pride isn't necessarily a good thing. That pride can take over someone and cause them to seem unfriendly to the people around them.